Hey everybody, it's Nick from Musical Life Denver. This is going to be video 2 in the 3-part video series on slide guitar. Video 1, I talked a bit about the different types of slides that you're going to find out on the market. Now in this video I want to talk a little bit more about the technique that we're going to use. So, the very first one I want to mention, in video 1, I had mentioned not to use your first finger for the slide. Second, third, or fourth are all better ideas. Now here's why. If I'm using my second finger, for instance, I put my first finger, it's whatever finger is farther down the neck. So if you're using your third finger, you'd want your second finger resting on the strings behind the slide. Not pushing down, but just resting as if you're muting the notes. Now what this does is it'll give you a little more stability, but it really cleans up the sound. Listen if I play a riff without dampening those notes. Now it doesn't necessarily sound bad, it's just real noisy. There's a lot of extra noise we don't want there. So listen what happens if I play a similar riff dampening the strings behind the slide. You notice that it cleans it up a lot. The notes are more distinct, have more clarity to them, and there's less noise. So that's a huge one. I really think that helps with the sound. So technique number 1. Technique number 2, this is a real simple one as far as the concept, but it takes a while to get down, and that's the vibrato. Now vibrato with slide is just like vibrato without slide, that you want to start small and start slow. As the feeling gets more familiar and comfortable, you can try speeding it up. But vibrato is key to slide guitar. The frets don't mean anything once you're using slide. They're just kind of visual markers to where your notes are. So vibrato is key. So next technique that we'll talk about is a huge one. And interestingly enough, it has not a lot to do with your fret hand and your slide, more to do with your pick and your picking hand. So let's take a riff here where we're gonna play an E major chord. We're just gonna hit the E in the major third. So if you're not sure what that means, we're gonna go to our 9th fret on the 3rd string, and we're gonna hit our 2nd string on the same fret. That's our major third. That's an E and a G sharp together. So we're gonna hit those 2 notes, and then we're gonna take our 2nd string and go up a half step to an A. And then back to our G sharp, back to our E. So the notes will be. Now here's what we're gonna do. When we go to slide up to the A half step, we wanna make sure our 3rd string, the note with the E on it, is not still ringing out. We don't want any sustain there, otherwise we're gonna get this, where we hear both notes go up a half step. We don't want that. What we want is to only hear the 2nd string ring out when we move up a fret. So how do we do that? Right hand, we're gonna mute the string that we don't want to ring out anymore. So you pick your 3rd string, you pick your 2nd string, and as you go to pick your 2nd string again to slide it up, that same movement, you touch your 3rd string to deaden it. Then you can do your half step on your 2nd string without that 3rd string interfering. So notice that I'm muting those notes when I go to pick the 2nd string again. So some slide guitar players prefer what's called a hybrid picking technique, where you use a combination of your pick and your fingers. So you can kind of like deaden the notes that you don't want to ring out with your pick, and then pick the other strings with your fingers. Some folks just prefer to not use a pick at all. There are some guitar players that typically use a pick, but when they're playing slide, don't. They go for the fingers because it facilitates that technique. But long story short, anytime you don't want a note to ring out when you're sliding, this is especially true to standard tuning, you want to mute the unwanted strings with your right hand. Easier said than done. That takes a while to get down. So those are some key techniques. Another one that I want to just go over that I went over briefly in the first video is the pressure. In the first video, I talked a lot about how the weight of the slide can affect if you're not applying enough pressure or too much, where you hear the frets. So, not only does the weight of the slide affect that, but how much you're pushing. So this is a trial and error thing to figure out, a lot of experimenting. You want to, take your slide, and if you hear this type of sound, you're not applying enough pressure. You want to give it a little bit more oomph. Now, if you're getting the sound where you hear the frets, not a smooth, if you're hearing more of a, that means there's too much pressure being applied. And so regardless of what size slide you decide on, how hard you're pushing down is a huge factor as well, and it's something to experiment with until you find that sweet spot. So hopefully this helps clear up some confusion with the technique behind slide. Stick around for video 3. I'm going to be talking more about some specific licks and riffs we can do with the slide. So have fun with it. We'll see you in the next one.